What if the person who walked into a billionaire CEO's office wasn't a polished executive, or a desperate job applicant but a 6-year-old girl holding a crumpled piece of paper, and the weight of her dying mother on her shoulders? In a world where wealth builds walls and power rarely kneels, one child decided to break through the glass and ask for help, not for herself, but for the one person she loved most. This is not a fairy tale. It's not a story about charity or pity. It's a story about presence, about the kind of courage that fits in a small red sweater and scuffed sneakers, about a man who thought he understood value until he met someone who truly needed saving, and how, in answering her, he found the only position in life that ever truly mattered. Lucas Chandler didn't believe in surprises. His entire life was structured, down to the minute. At 8 a.m. sharp, 5 days a week, he was seated behind his glass-top desk at the summit of Chandler Holdings, a company built on discipline, numbers, and cold precision. Every second of his morning was accounted for. Market updates at 8:05, regional reports at 8:20. A standing call with Singapore at 8 for 5. So when a knock interrupted his rhythm at exactly 8:11, he didn't hide his irritation. The door opened a crack. His assistant Melanie leaned in, her voice uncertain. "Mr. Chandler, there's someone here to see you." Lucas didn't look up. Who? Melanie hesitated. "A child. A little girl. She says she has a resume." Lucas's fingers paused above his keyboard. "A child." Before he could say another word, the door creaked open wider and she walked. She couldn't have been older than 6. Hair in a messy braid. A red sweater 2 sizes too big. A small backpack on her shoulders and scuffed sneakers on her feet. She looked absurdly small in the towering marble and glass office. She didn't flinch. She didn't ask permission. She walked straight to his desk, stood on tiptoe, and placed a folded piece of paper in front of him. "I need a job," she said. Melanie froze in the doorway. Lucas stared at the girl, at the paper, then back at the girl. "What's your name?" he asked slowly. "Ava Brooks." He picked up the paper. It was notebook paper, creased and worn, written in large, uneven crayon letters. "I can clean. I don't cry. I can learn fast. I help my mom. I don't eat much." A shaky heart was drawn in the corner. At the bottom, in bright red crayon, "Please." Lucas looked back at Ava. "Why do you need a job?" She blinked up at him. Her voice was steady, heartbreakingly calm. "My mom is sick. She can't work anymore. If I work, maybe we can stay where we are. Maybe she won't." "Go." Lucas felt a jolt in his chest, not pity, something heavier, something deeper. He studied the girl's face. She was serious, determined. She wasn't here for attention. She had come because this, somehow, was her plan. "Where's your mother now?" he asked. "At the clinic on 9th, Ava replied. "Room 3. She sleeps a lot. They said it's her body. They said there's nothing they can do without insurance." Lucas stood up. "Melanie," he said, without breaking eye contact with Ava, "cancel my meetings. Sir, all of them. And get the car. Now." He walked around the desk, bent to Ava's height. "Would you like to take me to meet your mom?" Ava nodded. "Then let's go." The black company sedan slid into traffic, cutting through the heart of the city. Ava sat in the back beside Lucas, her small frame nearly swallowed by the leather seat. She held her backpack in her lap like a lifeline, her feet not touching the floor. Lucas stole a glance at her in the rearview mirror. She wasn't looking around in awe. She wasn't impressed by the car or the driver or the cityscape rushing past. She looked out the window quietly, focused, like someone with a mission. At the clinic, the contrast hit him like a slap. It was cramped, dimly lit, with peeling paint and a waiting area packed too tightly with people who had nowhere else to go. Lucas followed Ava through it like a man in foreign territory. Room 3. Ava told the nurse at the front desk. "She's my mom." The nurse raised an eyebrow when she saw Lucas behind her, but didn't ask questions. She pointed down the hall. The hallway felt too narrow, the ceiling too low. Lucas's polished shoes clicked awkwardly against the scuffed linoleum. Ava stopped at the third door. "She might be asleep," she said softly. "She sleeps a lot now." She pushed the door open. Inside, the room was barely bigger than a supply closet. A metal-framed bed sat in the center. Camille Brooks lay motionless beneath thin hospital sheets. Her skin pale, her cheeks sunken, for tubes ran from her arm to a single outdated monitor that beeped every few seconds. Ava moved to her mother's side immediately and gently brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. "Mom," she whispered. "I brought someone." Lucas stayed near the door, suddenly unsure of himself. He had negotiated billion-dollar deals in boardrooms with ruthless precision, but he had no idea how to stand in this moment. He looked around the room, no flowers, no chart updates, no warmth, just waiting, the kind that feels like giving up. He stepped forward and placed Ava's crayon resume gently on the side table beside the bed. "I'm Lucas," he said quietly, more to Camille than to Ava. "Your daughter came to see me this morning." Ava turned to him. "They say she needs better care, but we don't have money, and I didn't know who else could help." Lucas looked at the little girl standing beside her mother, small hands balled into fists. Standing so still, not crying, not begging, just hoping. He pulled out his phone. "Do you mind if I make some calls?" he asked. Ava shook her head. In 5 minutes, he had called his private physician. In 10, he had arranged a transfer. In 15, he had his legal team drafting temporary coverage agreements. 2 hours later, Camille Brooks was being carefully lifted into a private ambulance, headed to one of the city's best private hospitals. Lucas rode with Ava in the back. She didn't say much, just held her mother's hand and stared at her face, as if memorizing every line in case it was the last time. When they arrived, a team of nurses and specialists met them at the door. Camille was admitted immediately. Tests were ordered. A private room was prepped on the 8th floor, clean, spacious, full of light. Lucas stood by as Ava settled into the corner chair next to the bed. She reached into her backpack and pulled out another drawing, 3 figures standing under a tree. A woman, a child, and a tall man in a suit. She taped it gently to the wall beside her mother's bed. "That's us," she said. Lucas looked at it for a long time. His throat tightened. "You're really something, Ava," he said. "You know that." Ava looked up at him with the same calm clarity she had the first moment. She walked into his office. "I just love her," she said. "That's all." Lucas nodded. "Then I think the world's about to learn what love looks like." The days that followed blurred together in a rhythm of quiet hope. Lucas came to the hospital every morning just after sunrise, no longer in a tailored rush, no longer checking his phone every 3 minutes. He brought hot cocoa in paper cups, warm muffins from the same corner bakery, and something intangible presence. Ava met him in the pediatric waiting lounge like it was normal now. She always took her cocoa with 2 marshmallows. They didn't speak much in the early mornings. They didn't need to. Camille remained unconscious, but her condition stabilized. Monitors beeped with steady rhythm. Her breathing became less labored. Doctors used words like encouraging, responsive, and slow progress. Lucas stayed close. He had meetings rescheduled, conference calls postponed, board memos delayed. His staff noticed the shift, but none dared question it. He wasn't just distracted, he was invested. Ava started drawing again. Her pictures changed. They weren't just of hospital beds and cloudy skies anymore. They had houses, trees, a tall figure in a blue suit holding her hand. She gave him one drawing every day, and he kept every single one in his coat pocket like sacred documents. One afternoon, Ava turned to him in the hallway and asked, "Are you really going to stay? Even after she gets better?" Lucas didn't hesitate. "Yes," she nodded, like she believed him. Like she needed to. The nurses began referring to Lucas not as a visitor, but as family. He helped rearrange Camille's room, brought in a small bookshelf for Ava's drawings, and even found a soft blanket with stars on it to replace the thin hospital-issued one. When Camille first opened her eyes, it was slow like a sunrise over the ocean, faint, then real. Ava had been sitting at her side, humming, her little fingers wrapped around her mother's. Lucas had stepped out for a moment, but when the nurse came to find him, her words were simple, "She's awake." He hurried back in and found Ava, crying quietly, not from fear, but from sheer relief. Camille's lips barely moved, but she whispered her daughter's name, Ava. Lucas stood back, heart pounding, until Camille's eyes flicked toward him. She didn't speak right away, but something in her expression changed. Recognition, gratitude, presence. He knelt beside her and said softly, "I'm Lucas. Ava came to see me. She saved you." Camille's eyes shimmered with tears, and she squeezed her daughter's hand. "Thank you," she rasped. From that moment on, everything changed. Camille began to regain strength. Ava slept better. Lucas stayed longer. One evening, as the city lights glittered outside the hospital window, Ava climbed into the chair beside him and handed him a drawing. It showed 3 people sitting under a tree, a woman with long hair, a child with a wide smile, and a tall man reading a book. She pointed. "That's us. We're a team now." Lucas smiled. "Yes, we are." He wasn't thinking in terms of charity or duty anymore. He wasn't counting the hours or measuring the cost. This wasn't a temporary detour. This was real. And every moment reminded him of what he had been missing. Later that night, as Ava curled up in the cot next to her mother and Camille drifted into steady sleep, Lucas sat just outside the room with a legal pad in hand, not filled with numbers or deals, but with notes about Ava's school enrollment, pediatric checkups, and housing possibilities. He looked through the glass window at the 2 of them, mother and daughter, and whispered to himself, "This isn't about saving them. It's about saving me." And maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late. The morning sun spilled through the hospital window like a quiet promise. Camille sat upright in her bed for the first time, propped up by pillows, her eyes alert and smiling faintly. Her hands were still thin, her voice still weak, but there was something unshakable in her presence now, like a woman slowly returning to herself. Lucas brought breakfast again, this time with Ava's favorite pastry, chocolate-filled and still warm. Ava beamed. She sat up today, all by herself. She whispered, as if afraid saying it too loudly might undo the miracle. "I saw," Lucas said, his smile soft but deep. She looked stronger. They ate together by the window, Camille nibbling slowly, Ava chattering between bites, and Lucas just listening, absorbing every word like it mattered more than any quarterly report ever had. That afternoon, the doctors came in with news. Camille would be transferred to a recovery unit within the week. Rehab would follow. She had a long road ahead, but she was out of danger. Lucas stayed to help fill out the paperwork. He had already secured them a small apartment 2 blocks from the hospital, a clean, sunlit space with 2 bedrooms and a view of the park. Temporary, he told Camille, until she was ready to decide what came next. That evening, before leaving, Ava handed him a final drawing. This one showed a house, a dog though they didn't have one, and 3 people standing in the front yard holding hands. Underneath, she had written, in large block letters, "Our family." Lucas swallowed the lump in his throat. "Is that me?" he asked. Ava nodded. "You're part of us now, even if you don't have to be." He crouched to her level. "I want to be." As he turned to say goodbye, Camille reached for his hand. Her voice was still faint, but steady. "I didn't ask for any of this," she said, "but thank you for showing up anyway." He didn't answer right away. He simply looked at her, then at Ava, and nodded. "You both saved me too," he said, "more than you know." That night, walking out of the hospital into the cool air, Lucas Chandler didn't check his phone. He didn't think about profit margins or deadlines. He just thought about a little girl who once walked into his office holding a crayon-written and a heart full of hope, and gave him the job of a lifetime, the job of being human again.